Good evening, everyone present here, and good evening also to the world audience watching us live in Facebook and YouTube. This is Rudranarayan Das taking this privilege to warmly welcome you all to World Human Sciences and Management Conference. Invitations to global dialogue on agnotological context, disciplinary practices of social sciences and policy frames. An initiative towards think times and rethink episteme. Distinguished participants and partakers, it's a glorious moment to extend my warm wishes on behalf of the Center for ADIVASI Research and Development. At this international conference, we built with the intent of active and interactive learning and discussion. As you know, that organized by Center for ADIVASI Research and Development in collaboration with Indian Institute of Management, Sambalpur, Central University of Odisha, Koraput, and Ravenshaw University, Cuttack. On behalf of Center for Adivasi Research and Development, I want to convey my heartfelt gratitude to our patrons, Professor Sanjay Kumar Nayak, Vice Chancellor, Ravenshaw University, Professor Mahadev Joyswal, Director, Indian Institute of Management, and Professor Sarath Kumar Palita, Vice Chancellor, Central University of Odisha. The convener of this largest virtual conference, eminent Indian historian, Professor Chandi Prasad Nanda, and eminent policy activist, writer, and philanthropist, Mr. Charudhar Paningrai. Dear friends, the main outcome of this conference is to come up with national and international framework for the education system in the future. The crux of this conference will be the use of digital technologies such as artificial intelligence, augmented and virtual reality, that is being increasingly adopted after this COVID pandemic. We hope this conference would help for students, faculties, researchers, and our general audiences to find different knowledge and expand their mental horizon and help the education system to adopt the best in future by the policymakers. Ladies and gentlemen, our center is a leading research-oriented institution promoting ethnographic, empirical, and evidence-based research for engaging and addressing the challenges that 21st century globe is facing today. Our prime agenda is come up with potential policy solutions for social change while believing in the idea of debate, dialogue, and discourse. Our institution focuses on marginalized communities and works for their livelihood to protect the nature, culture, language, and identity in particular. The age of modernity has witnessed that change is the only constant phenomenon for societal purpose to enhance knowledge. Our information work for them is methodical and avoid paradoxically framework which is neglected so many centuries from theory to become practice. Our center sincerely believes in the concept of social marketing, which is seriously looking for non-profit marketing and builds new social entrepreneurship for check and balance mechanism. Our center come to serve with the holistic approach of critical thinking in education and fill the gaps and plan accordingly for the voiceless communities. Dear friends, it gives me tremendous contentment to introduce the most esteemed personality of today's symposia is none other than Dr. Sohini Mahapatra ji. She is an assistant professor of National Law University, Odisha, and Dr. Mahapatra was born and raised in her roots in the city of Cuttack, Odisha. She is an assistant professor of National Law University, Odisha, Cuttack, having joined the university in 2016 and alumnus of the university. Also, Dr. Mahapatra completed her master's in law from NLU Odisha in 2014, where she was awarded the university gold medal for securing the rank first in LLM. She completed her PhD in 2018 with specialization in animal welfare law, making her the first person in the country with a PhD in the field of animal law. She completed her BA LLB from Amity Law School, Amity University, Noida in 2012, where she was awarded merit scholarship by Amity University for academic performance. Her area of expertise of animal welfare law, media law, and labor law. In January 2020, Dr. Mahapatra published her book, Non-Human Animals and the Law. And an analysis of animal welfare and animal rights within the Indian legal discourse by Thomson Reuters. The foreword of which was written by Srimati Menka Gandhiji. She was also edited a book titled Animal and Environmental Jurisprudence, a Wildlife Perspective, published by Satyam Law International School. She is also one of the faculty of NALSA, Hyderabad's Animal Law Program. Dr. Mahapatra has contributed to academic research in the field of animal law through her scholarly article on issues of animal welfare in journal, books, blogs, and other platforms, and has additionally also presented papers of several national and international seminars and conferences. Welcome to World Human Sciences and Management Conference to Dr. Mahapatra. And your topic is, as suggested by you, it's understanding the role of animal law in India and why animals matter, which is a very definitely eye-opening session for us, because we are living in a ecosystem, and the ecosystem is very important to be balanced. And with this note, I would like to stop here and invite Dr. Mahapatra to initiate her talk. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you so much. I am, first of all, extremely thankful for this opportunity. So that because animal welfare law or animal law in general is such a very new area that any platform where I can get to share about this particular subject, this particular area, I feel that even one extra person listening to it can actually make a lot of difference. So I'll quickly go to the topic, why I chose the topic of understanding the road of animal law in India and why animals matter is because my basic premise is that not all our listeners, not everybody who's watching this or attending this belongs to a legal background. And we keep hearing a lot about animal law. We keep hearing about judgments. Supreme Court said this, High Court said that. So what exactly is animal welfare law? How it has evolved over a period of time in India? What does it actually mean? Early on, philosophy of why animals matter, why they don't matter, why we should have laws for them. All of that I would like to today's talk, and I'll share a small PPT with you, and I'll try to not use too many legal jargons, but just give me a second to just share the screen. Yeah. So I hope the screen is visible to everyone.
Yeah, ma'am, please.
All right, thank you. So the reason why I'm sharing the slide is when we talk about the word animal, I'm sure each one of us, when we hear the word animal, it stirs some kind of an emotion in us. It could be love, it could be hatred, it could be fear, it could be compassion, it could be absolute, apathy, empathy, or completely neutral, right? So whether we interact with animals on a regular basis or not, we, in a way, as humans, are dependent on them. To what extent our lives are interdependent, are interconnected, we may or may not realize it on a daily basis. But what you see on your screen now are broadly the different categories of animals. There are wild animals, there are domesticated animals, there are farmed animals, there are captive animals. There are different kinds of animals, and for different categories of animals, we have different kinds of laws. how stringent these laws are, how well they are implemented, that is a different story altogether. But animal in itself is not just a very generic word. It's not just a very, you cannot generalize it in terms of what you feel for a dog, the same thing you feel for a cow, the same thing you feel for a snake. That's not the case with us also. So similarly, different categories of animals require different kinds of care, different kinds of rules, regulations, policies that need to be framed in order to make their lives better. But at the common thread of it all, there has to be sort of a compassion towards animals. We should not be practicing any kind of cruelty towards animals. And having said that, I'm sure a lot of questions pop into your mind and pop into your heads, that what is permissible under the law, what is not permissible under the law. So there are different levels to it. There are technicalities, nitty-gritties to it. So today, what I will discuss is why we need a law in the sorry. Okay. So to first begin with, who is an animal? I'm sure each one of us has a different definition of who an animal is. So what I have taken, the definitions that you can see on your screen, is actually taken from the Webster Dictionary. And you will find that each of these definitions, each of these dictionary meanings, they indicate a different kind of understanding of who an animal is. If you look at the first definition, it says any creature that is not a bird or a fish or a reptile or an insect or a human. So does that mean that we do not need to care for birds? We do not need to have laws for fish or for birds or for reptiles? The second definition tells you that any living thing that is not a plant or a human. The third one says that any living creature, including humans. We also say that man is a social animal, right? So is animal kingdom the bigger picture of it, and are we humans also part of that kingdom as animals? Are we also part of the animal kingdom just because we are a living creature? So these are certain things that we need to ponder upon, but we do not give it that much of thought on a regular basis. The fourth definition, if you see it, says that a person who behaves in a cruel or unpleasant way, right? So even in our daily colloquial use of language, we sometimes use the word "don't behave like an animal," right? Or "don't live like an animal." So that is also a way or a phrase that we use very commonly. So what is this exact definition of animal? Who is it that we need to make laws for? Why is it important to make laws for animals? Are we as humans actually starkly different from animals altogether? Now, this entire chain of having a law for animals, or whether to have law for animal welfare or not, it began very, very early. So if we look at the earliest of philosophers and earliest of jurisprudence, we find that philosophers like Aristotle, like Thomas Aquinas, Descartes, all of them, they all came with their own theories of what is the role or status of an animal. I'll not go into the depth or details of all these theories because I don't want to make it very theoretical in nature. But just for an understanding, Aristotle, for example, said that the entire being is, or all living beings are in the form of a pyramid. And there are plants at the bottom, then there are animals, and at the top of the pyramid is the man or human beings. And each one in that pyramid is placed in a position so as to make the life of the one above them better. So his understanding of how you draw that hierarchy is based on some kind of an ability. So as per Aristotle, human beings are the highest or top of the ladder because they can reason and have the ability to rationalize, right? So as humans, we also sometimes say or believe that we are more rational compared to an animal, and that is why we are superior. So does that mean that rationality is the drawing or dividing line between us and animals, and therefore we require extra protection, or we require more laws for our safety and our protection compared to animals? Animals, as per Aristotle, can only sense and move, but they do not have the ability to reason. So say, for example, if a dog had to, say, bite somebody, the dog will not put in a lot of rationality or a thought or reason into whether or whether not to bite someone. That is what was Aristotle's understanding, that they do not have the ability to reason, and therefore humans are more superior. Similarly, the second triangle, or the second pyramid that you see, it puts God, humans, and animals in the pyramid. So God is the ultimate end of the universe, and we as humans have been placed on this planet to serve God, and animals have been placed on this planet to serve us so that we can serve God. So in both these cases, we find that humans have always been put in a very superior pedestal, that have always believed that we are superior to other, living beings, and therefore our lives are more important than anybody else's. Within human beings also, we have a lot of chain of superiority and discrimination, and all of that is there. But in the broader picture, we find that broadly, if we categorize as humans and animals, we find that we place ourselves in a much superior position compared to animals. The third philosophy that I have shown here, and you see the picture of a clock, is because this particular philosopher believed that animals are just like machines. They're just like, the hands of a clock keep ticking automatically, and it's a very all animal behavior is a very, very mechanical process, that they do not have any consciousness or awareness, and therefore they do not deserve as much importance as a human life does. But I'm sure that if any of us if you have a pet at home, or if you have ever interacted with any kind of an animal, believing that they are purely machines or they are completely mechanical in nature, that would be entirely wrong to say. Every animal, no matter what kind of animal it is, does have some level of consciousness, some level of awareness. Even if you, say, throw a stone at an animal, the animal would react and start running. That's because the animal is aware of the fact that it is something which is going to be hurtful, it is something that might be dangerous. So all of that cannot come if you are just a machine, like a clock. So these kind of philosophies were the earliest kind of philosophies which where they're about human-animal interaction and the status of animals and why they should not be given as much importance. But thankfully, and over the years, this perception in philosophy has also changed, and what now forms the basis of laws across the globe, not just in India, but across several countries, across several constitutions, across several uh, different legislations in different countries. The basic belief that both humans and animals are sentient beings, which means that they have the ability to experience pain, they have the ability to suffer. So if I pinch myself and feel pain, and I do the same to an animal, if I hit it with a stick, if I throw a stone at them, if I beat them up, they also feel pain. And therefore, the suffering that we experience as humans and the suffering that they experience as animals is perhaps more or less the same thing, because we are both sentient beings. We both have the capacity to suffer. We both have the capacity or ability to feel pain. And as living beings, both humans and animals do not want to feel any kind of suffering or pain. And therefore, that should form the basis of protecting animals. So sentience, the ability to feel pain, is the basis of having any anti-cruelty laws for animals. Why do we need anti-cruelty laws? Why do we need protection of animals from cruelty, from suffering? Is because they can suffer. And this philosophy or this theory by Jeremy Bentham, that in a way kind of paved the journey or paved the road for what animal law today looks like. That your basis for having laws or policies or protection cannot be based on a higher degree of what a living creature possesses. So, for example, rationality cannot be the dividing or distincting factor. The ability to reason, the ability to talk, all of that cannot be the basis for providing protection, legal protection or laws for somebody. It has to be something much more what do you say, much more fundamental in nature. And the basic fundamental characteristic of any living creature, be it animals or humans, is the ability to feel pain. And therefore, there is a necessity and need to have laws which will protect animals from this kind of suffering or from cruelty. Now, that idea brings us also to the idea of equal consideration of interests. So just like I, as a human being, have an interest in not suffering, similarly, an animal also has a similar interest in not suffering. Nobody, no living creature on this planet wants to or likes to suffer. And just because we, over several years, several decades, have put ourselves on a superior platform, on a superior pedestal, does not automatically mean that animals have become inferior to us and that their ability to feel pain or their ability to suffer is any lesser than us. Definitely, our minds are more evolved, our, say, the way we conduct ourselves, the way we live and the kind of progress that we have made as human race is unmatchable to an extent. But at the same time, we also have to think that our existence on this planet is interdependent. We are dependent on animals, we're dependent on nature, we're dependent on plants, we're dependent on trees, greenery, and coexistence is the only way forward. Today, when we talk about issues like global warming, we are talking about climate change, we are talking about how we are reducing the lifespan of Earth, and we do not have, there's not much left to pass on to our next generations. That is the doing of humankind. It's because we as humans have constantly believed that with our this power and magic of intelligence that we have been gifted with, we are superior beings. But when we say that we are superior to everything else that is put on this planet, it comes with a responsibility as well. It cannot just be at the cost of exploitation of resources, exploitation of animals, exploitation of plants, exploitation of every other natural resource that we find on this planet. It comes with a responsibility, and just like this responsibility that we have towards everything that is there on this planet, it includes animals as well. And this idea of considering ourselves superior, considering our humankind superior to animals or to anybody else, that is also a form of discrimination. As per philosophers, as per scholars, what the term that they use is speciesism, which means that we as a species, as a human species, we are discriminatory towards other species, and we believe that they deserve lesser importance compared to us. And it is the same kind of discrimination that we find within the human race as well. Racism, sexism, casteism, all of these are examples of discrimination where one section feels that they are superior to the other section by way of caste, by way of color, by way of gender. And that is the same thing as speciesism, where we feel that we as a species deserve more importance, or we feel that we as a species feel more pain compared to any other species. And if we were to apply the logic of, say, intelligence, rationality, ability to think, ability to reason out, then, and if that were to be the basis of providing protection, giving laws, or not being cruel to animals, then the same thing would become applicable within the human race as well. And then that could also be problematic and not be in the best of interest for humans as well. So this on this slide itself, on the third last point, you would see that there's something called the theory of marginal cases. So what that means is that if we were to give so much of importance to rationality, give so much of importance to the ability to talk, or give importance to the ability to think, to reason out, then there are a lot of humankind, examples within the humankind who are not able to do it as well. So they are termed as marginal cases. For example, an infant, a baby, say, who's just born, or who's say 6 months, 3 months, whatever, that baby, that human baby, cannot reason out, cannot talk, does not have the ability to rationalize. Does that mean that we can treat that human baby in whatever way we like? Can we be cruel to that human baby just because that baby does not have the ability to speak, the ability to be rational about any decision, or does not have the ability to take in a decision in the first place? So if that were not to be done to a human baby, why is that acceptable to be done to an animal? So that is in a way discriminatory, that we as a species have become or have considered ourselves to be so superior that it is acceptable on some level to unnecessarily cause harm, to unnecessarily cause pain and suffering to animals. Another example of this marginal case could be any person of an unsound mind. A person of an unsound mind also does not have probably the ability to rationalize, does not have the ability to reason, but yet we still take care of them. We still do not try to cause them any pain or suffering. So the point being that at the end of it all, we have to have compassion. We have to have the basic understanding that unnecessary pain and suffering is not acceptable. And even under the Indian laws, that is the basic principle or basic foundation on which our primary legislation or statutes related to animal law are framed, that unnecessary pain and suffering should not be inflicted on any animal. Another perspective of looking at it is this subject of a life theory, where this is what is considered to be a subject of a life, that anything, whether it's a human, whether it's an animal, anything, anybody who is a subject of a life, who has a sense of future, who has a memory, who has the ability to, say, initiate action in pursuit and desires of goals, anything or anyone who's a subject of a life deserves rights and deserves protection. Now, the debate that usually comes up here is that for anybody to have rights or to exercise rights, legal rights, has to have that legal personality, which means that if my right is violated, I can go to a court of law. So if your right is violated, you can also go and file a case yourself because you feel that your right has been violated. Whatever right it could be a freedom of movement, it could be a right to life, it could be a freedom of speech, anything. But an animal cannot go to a court of law themselves. So if we are cruel to animals, or if we cause any kind of pain, any kind of suffering to an animal, that animal will not go and hire a lawyer and tell that so-and-so person, beats me 10 times a day and I would like to file a police complaint. And then I would like to take that person to court. Obviously, an animal cannot do it. But that cannot be the end of it. Just because an animal himself or herself itself cannot do it does not mean that there can be no legal protection for the animal. A minor, for example, a minor human being, anyone who's below 18 years of age, cannot himself or herself go to a court of law. It has to be through somebody, right? So similarly, there has to be a guardian for an animal as well. So for any person to have a legal protection, there has to be a legal standard. And that's what probably makes it quite debatable that animals do not have a legal personality. They cannot themselves act legally or take legal action. So somebody has to do it on their behalf. And who can do it on their behalf? So like I said at the beginning also, that if we consider ourselves to be very, very superior, and we have taken human race and humankind to another levels altogether, it comes with a lot of responsibility. And that responsibility of taking care of animals, fighting for animals, ensuring that they get legal protection is also our responsibility. And this is where the law for animal protection begins. Now, the evolution of animals in India especially has been quite drastic. So it has evolved from a property status to that of a person. In general parlance, we feel that a person is only a human being. But over a period of time, the courts, the Supreme Court, the High Courts, through various decisions, through various judgments, have recognized animals as persons as well. And what has been this journey, or what has been this process of evolution of animals from property to person? Now, in India, okay, first thing is that broadly, what we find is that animal law or animal jurisprudence, it can be categorized into two parts. One is rights-based approach and one is a welfare approach. Now, rights-based approach is what is considered as an extremist kind of an approach, where you cannot use animals for any purpose whatsoever. So that would mean that you cannot have zoos as well, because it is considered that when you put animals inside zoos, you are restricting their natural movement, you are restricting them, or you are taking them away from their natural habitat. So zoos should not be there. Animals cannot be used for a lot of other purposes also, like experiments, for food, any kind of utility of animal is completely prohibited. So that is one end of the spectrum, that is one extreme. The other kind of animal law or animal jurisprudence that is there is a welfare approach. And what India follows is a welfare-based approach. So it's primary statute or primary legislation which protects animals is the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals Act of 1960. And that statute also talks about that you cannot have, or you cannot inflict unnecessary pain and suffering on animals. So it is based on the premise of necessity, as only wherever necessary. So say, for example, slaughtering of animals for food is permitted under the law, right? So it is considered as a welfare-based approach. But at the same time, say you cannot use animals for purposes of entertainment. So in circuses, you find that usage of animals is banned. If you are utilizing or using animals in, say, films, there are a lot of regulations, a lot of laws that you have to follow. And I'm sure if you watch movies, you would find that these days you find a disclaimer at the beginning of every movie that no animals were harmed during the making of this film. So necessity, a lot of it a lot of Indian law legislation is related to necessity. But in recent times, through a lot of judgments of the courts, there has been a slight shift in also providing rights to animals, and also providing or recognizing the fact that it cannot always be like a user and an object kind of a relationship. It cannot be a master-servant relationship between humans and animals. On some level, we have to understand and recognize that animals also have certain basic rights which need to be protected as well. Yeah. Now, why I say that animals have always been viewed as property. Even now, it's become so subconscious nature of us as humans that when we address animals, we address them as objects or as property. I have even if it's my pet, I love my pet to the utmost level, we still use the phrase, or we still use in our usual language, that I own a dog, I own a cow. This ownership comes from this subconscious level of, I don't know, being a master or perceiving them as lower to us, which has been passed on to us across several generations, that they are object or property. We never say that I own a daughter, I own a son, right? Or I own a sister, I own a mother, I own a father. But I own a dog, I own a cat, or I own a horse. This ownership comes from the idea of perceiving them as objects or as property. And if we go back to one of our ancient texts, that is Arthashastra by Kautilya, in a lot of references of Arthashastra, you find that animals have been used in a lot of places, and it is in the context of property. So, say, for example, during division of property for inheritance, animal is also considered as a share, and goats were considered as special shares during division of property for inheritance. Similarly, for sports, for royal sports, for the king and for the entire kingdom, it uses terms or phrases like the land should be full of harmless animals, so that it is easier for the king or for the prince or anyone from the royal kingdom to hunt. So we have historically, philosophically always believed animals to be as objects, as property. And unfortunately, in the Indian legal scenario also, we have retained some of it even till today. For example, the Indian Penal Code, which is your primary statute for criminal law, for any criminal offenses under which you are charged. And it has different chapters: offenses against human body, offenses against this, offenses against that. So there's one chapter on offenses against property. And any kind of provision that you find related to animal is put under that chapter, which means that even till date, one of the biggest legislations in India perceives animals as property. Even under theft, when we see Indian Penal Code provision for theft, movable property, animal is categorized as movable property. So you can steal my dog, you can steal my cow, and theft is always of property, of movable property. So there is no difference between stealing my phone and stealing my dog, right? The punishment would probably be the same. So this perception has to somewhere change. There are two sides to everything. So obviously there are people who believe that there are certain benefits of viewing animals as property, because if they are viewed as property, then there is somebody who is taking ownership of the animal. So once there is ownership, then you have a duty, you have a responsibility, and you will take care of them. But at the same time, we also have to think that, is it okay to view animals as property? Because once we give something, anything, the status of property or an object, we give ourselves that right to do whatever we want with that property. If this phone is my property, I can just throw it off the window. It's an object, it's a property, and I can do whatever I want with it. I can smash it with a hammer as well. If a dog, a horse, any animal for that matter, if it is of the same status, can I do the same thing to the animal as well? Can I smash it with a hammer? Can I throw it from the top of a building? Is it acceptable to do so? So these are certain things that we should really be thinking about, we should really be pondering upon. And in the legal world, there's a lot written about, there's a lot said about the status of animals. And one thought that floated was that animals are also citizens, that under our constitution, if we look at certain provisions, we can actually grant citizenship to animals as well. And humans and animals, we have a very symbiotic relationship, and we cannot detach ourselves entirely from animals. So I cannot say that I'm not dependent on animal for anything at all. I could be dependent on it directly for, say, consumption of some edible item. I could be indirectly dependent on it for agricultural purposes, because some agrarian animal somewhere is being used for agricultural purposes, and therefore I'm getting gain that. There's always a symbiotic relationship between humans and non-human animals, and that recognition has to be there. The same kind of consciousness that we have now awakened ourselves to towards the environment, that we have suddenly woken up and realized that the environment is depleting and natural resources are depleting, and we are at the brink of exhausting resources, we are at the brink of extinction of animals. It's because for several years, we did not pay any heed or any importance to this relationship that we share with nature, this relationship that we share with every other living, non-living being that is put on this planet. And that understanding, that acknowledgement, that acceptability is extremely important. So how have now, how has it changed from property to actually becoming person? I gave you an example of a law which still holds it as property, but through several judicial decisions, through several Supreme Court judgments, High Court judgments, the court once that we have to accept the fact that animals are capable of taking care of their rights. Like I said, animal law on its own. It has to be done by somebody else on its behalf. And that guardianship, that responsibility, that duty is on the state, is on the courts, is on every other citizen like us to ensure that they have a cruelty-free life. Every duty that is imposed in the law through various provisions in different kinds of acts and different kinds of statutes, every duty that is imposed, that duty is always imposed on a human being, obviously. So that duty is automatically to be understood as a corresponding right of the animal. That why do I have a duty towards this? Say, for example, under the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals Act, the one provision which defines what is cruelty or what amounts to cruelty, and it's a long list of things for which is considered as an offense and for which you could be imposed a fine upon. Something as basic as tying an animal to a chain whole day long is considered as cruelty. And I'm sure most of us would have either seen this being done or heard stories, or you know of people who do it. Even if it's a pet at home, they are tied to the chain whole day long. So under the law, that is considered as cruelty, and it's a punishable offense. Unfortunately, the punishment under these statutes are absolutely abysmally low, but nonetheless, it is still considered as an offense. And it is our duty, it is the duty of whoever is the caretaker of the animal, the guardian of the animal, to ensure that this cruelty is not met out. And this duty is automatically a right of the animal also not to be treated in a certain way, or the right in a positive way, the right to be treated in a certain way. So these things have to be subconsciously or very, very consciously and with effort, it has to be ingrained and registered in the minds of humans to understand actually how they have to be treated. The courts, the Supreme Court also has gone to an extent of recognizing mental cruelty for animals. These days, we are very vocal about mental health. We are very vocal about how mental well-being is important, especially, I think, after the pandemic. A lot of importance is being given to mental health and how our happiness quotient and is extremely important. The same thing is applicable for animals as well. So stress, mental agony, sadness, suffering, mental suffering, being upset, all of these are emotions that different animals also go through. So mental cruelty, recognizing mental cruelty is also equally important. There are across in different countries, and in Germany, in Switzerland, animal welfare laws. They have it enshrined in their constitution, and they are considered to have one of the best animal protection laws across the world. They also recognize mental cruelty and mental aspect of it as well, that it's not just about physical suffering. If you say, for example, the example of, we have under the Indian law, we have slaughterhouse rules, that any animal which has to be slaughtered for food has to be slaughtered inside designated and it's rapid. I'm sure all of us must have come across it at some point. But the rules or the policy states no animal should be slaughtered in front of another animal. Why is that? It's because someone else being slaughtered, it triggers fear, stress, anxiety in the animal as well. So our laws, in some way, they recognize all of these aspects, but the execution, the implementation of it is something which needs much more stringency and has to really, really be strongly applied. We call an animal a person. That is also something I'm sure a lot of you may be wondering. You might be thinking that an animal. Now, legally, under the law, persons are of two kinds. One is your natural persons, which are us, and then there are legal or juristic persons, which are created under the law. So a company, an association, all of these are considered as persons for purposes of law. So it is not restricted only to human beings alone. So therefore, if the status of a personhood, of being a person, can be extended to non-human entities like corporations and companies, there is obviously no reason why it cannot be given to non-human animals as well. So under this understanding, or this pretext, or this presumption that person is not an exclusive tag for humans, animals can also be considered as persons if they are given the status of person or personhood. They also can enjoy rights like we have under the law. And just like a company is considered as a legal person or a juristic person, and the company is run by a number of persons or a group of persons, or directors, group of directors or shareholders of whoever, and they take the decisions on behalf of the company, or if anything goes wrong with the company, they go to the court of law. Similarly, for animals also, when they are given the status of personhood, they also require a guardian. So there have been judgments, there have been cases where idols inside a temple, the murtis that we see inside a temple, that has also been given the status of a person. So a temple has a trust. The idol inside the temple, the deity that we worship, is given the status of a person, and the trust of the temple is in charge of that person. So similarly, a trusted relation can also extend to animals as well. And just because they themselves cannot fight for their rights, they themselves cannot go to a court of law, they themselves cannot take any action, cannot deprive them of these kind of rights or these kind of protections. So animals are also within the ambit of person, and the state, the courts, the every other human being around them have the same responsibility of taking care of these animals. So we are designated to act on a behalf of them, and that's what the courts say as well. There is actually so much of divide between right and welfare, because like I said, that when we hear the word animal law or animal welfare, we immediately start thinking of it from a very extremist point of view, that okay, we are not supposed to eat certain things, we are not supposed to do this. So there's a lot of there are two extremes, and because the focus I feel has always been so much on these two extremes, we often miss out on the gray area that is in between. So that gray area is what I call as rightful welfare, that if we were to at least give welfare of animal as a matter of right to them, that it is not acceptable to treat them in a certain way, that it is imperative sorry, that it is imperative that you treat them with compassion, that you recognize and acknowledge the fact that they can feel, that they have emotions, or they can go through suffering. That can be a very good beginning for what we intend to achieve eventually. And globally, if we see, there's a World Organization for Animal Health, and that organization, it's a UN organization, and it talks about 5 basic freedoms which animals must be given at all costs. And even the Supreme Court and various high courts in India have recognized that these 5 things are imperative for any animal, just like we have our own fundamental rights under the Constitution. Similarly, there are these 5 freedoms that is absolutely crucial for any animal. And if we actually get to a point where our current legislation is amended and it is redrafted and the legislation is passed, then we might also see inclusion of these freedoms in our in the Indian statute as well. I'll just quickly run through these 5 freedoms. One is that they should have freedom from hunger, thirst, and malnutrition. So any person who's in charge of an animal, caretaker, or you are in possession of an animal, the animal must have proper food, must have access to fresh water, and proper nutritious diet for its own health and strength. Just like we put in so much of thought into our own nutrition, into our own health, the same thing is applicable for animals as well. Freedom from fear and distress. Like I was saying, that mental suffering, trauma, anxiety, fear, all of these are emotions that even animals go through and even animals feel. So if you have ever interacted with an animal, you understand that when you pet an animal, you can see that the animal is happy, or if you give the animal some kind of a treat, the animal is happy. So if they can have emotions of happiness and joy, then they can also have emotions of fear and distress. So they should have freedom from fear and distress, freedom from physical and thermal discomfort. So every animal must have or should ideally have proper shelter, proper resting area, adequate space. There's so much of debate that happens or that goes around now about poultry animals. We see a lot of poultry birds caged and stuffed into cages, caged together with no space for movement at all. While it is permitted under the law to have poultry farms and to use poultry animals for food and for other purposes, while they are still alive, it is still their right to have adequate space to experience their natural free movement. That is also extremely important. Their physical comfort, thermal comfort. We have to bear in mind the heat, the cold, the monsoons, everything that we apply to ourselves. That's why we hear that, put a bowl of water or a container of water out of your homes during the heat for the strays to have some water. So these are certain basic things that we tend to overlook. We tend to overlook. Pain, injury, and disease, treatment of animals, treatment of any kind of injury that they have suffered, freedom to express normal patterns of behavior. Every animal should be in a space which is closest to their natural behavior pattern, which is why, say, because when we are training animals in a circus to perform in a certain way, it is not necessarily their normal behavior pattern or their usual behavior. We put them through a lot of pain, a lot of suffering during their training process, and then they react to that in a particular way. So it's not perform, but we force them to behave it in a certain way, and therefore it was considered as illegal. These are certain very basic thoughts and basic ideas that I thought I'll just throw around and I'll share with you, so that you're just, if not anything else, if a little more conscious and a little aware of what this field looks like and how much we can make a difference. I'd like to stop there, and if there's any questions or any other comments, I'd be happy to take.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for your wonderful deliberation. Now I'd like to invite Dr. Jena to initiate a comment over.
Thank you, Rudra. Thank you so much, Dr. Mahapatra, for very furious and very engaging ideas shared with us in the global audience in platform like WHSMC. It's really very proud privilege to announce you are the first, the daughter of our state and our soil, to hold on such a very prestigious work on animal law. It's really a proud privilege to all of us, and congratulate for this particular work. And at the same time, when we are initiating the dialogue in a Mapping Mind series that is called global dialogue series, World Human Science and Management Conference, we have put 2 and 3 important questions to you. First, when you rightly mentioned about the Kautilya's balance theory, all we know when we are in schools, we have get through this proper idea about the life cycle and how the process of life cycle, all it was about. And then we moving forward, when the crisis world, you rightly mentioned about planet and also little bit consciousness about earth, the psychological phenomenon of impact on this particular living agency and non-living agency, and you put the right direction of this counter narrative part of dialogue and very conscious about these animals, right? And when you gone through this particular phenomena of this apex court of this country, not for this Indian context, it throughout, you rightly pick some big names from UN and USA. Those are seriously working on these animal rights, on animal issues. I would like to know more brief about when this Niyamgiri movement happened. What kind of animal activists we can found there? Because they are elephant corridor and they are tiger corridors as far as concerns and information is related to the issue. Then if you look seriously about the last time when the Simlipal, the one of the most important zoo of our northern part of Odisha, worried out, no animal activist was shouted there. Even last, when the coastal highway announced near about 3 to 4 years ago, numbers of people are coming and they are shouting to protest their land rights and their individual psychology and individual protest theory and their cultural genesis is concerned. But the animal activists are keep remaining in muted and silent. Why not in state like Odisha? When if you go to the Nandankanan, is very famous from our school days. People are always wondering to go to there, and we are reading in newspaper somewhere the named missed out, like tiger, like crocodile, like birds, and like other animals. What is your suggestions? And if you look and locate Indian academic as concerned, no chapter should be draw the attention of whole pedagogical system of this country to our about animals' right. If you look human science, there is nothing to get. And if you look natural sciences, also there is nothing to get, to read, to write, or to revoke. You rightly mentioned about the eventually crisis. What meant for the crisis of animal world has happened? The animal world is in really very crisis and we are in very trouble these days. What happened with the animals? Do you believe they can get vaccinated after this corona came? Or what happened with these animals as in those are living in the forest? Or always we considered human is a social animal and animal is a wildlife or wild animal. What is the differences between the social animal and wild animal? I don't comparison both the social animal and wild animal because animals are not right to talk, not right to protest, and not right to behave like human. That is the difference. And they are not speak well. And they are nothing to say because they don't have any language to speak. What is your idea? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Jena, for your questions and your insights. I think the problem is actually multifold. One is, like I said, that the animal world in itself is so diverse. There are terrestrial animals, there are wild animals, there are aquatic animals, there are domesticated animals. And on some level, the laws in India are also trying to meet these diverse needs of animals. So for wildlife animals, wild animals, you have a separate law altogether, your wildlife protection. For aquatic animals, again, you have to, you need a separate law, but it is merged under the Wildlife Act. Domesticated animals are all covered under the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals Act. So the problem somewhere, I think, is that we fail to look at it in unison. Like I was mentioning during my talk also, that we do not see unison in animal kind. And within the animal kind, not find a lot of unison in terms of the responsibility that we have to frame laws for their protection or frame policies for their protection. That unison or that common meeting point somewhere, we are not able to get so far. We've not able to achieve. So the needs and requirements of all these different kinds of categories of animals are very, very different. We have regulations for zoos. We have policies for zoos and how it should be regulated. So one problem is this diversification and our ability or inability to address it. Second thing is the execution of it. Like a lot of other laws in India, the execution of animal laws in India are also quite poor, unfortunately very, very poor. The activism part of it, again, how do I put it? Activism part of it is very urban, is a very urban, or unfortunately has restricted to a very urban setup. We find a lot of organizations, animal organizations who work for animal welfare and who are doing brilliant work, but there's so much to do that you mostly find them restricted to taking care of strays, taking care of agrarian animals, poultry animals, and then the wild are left out. Or you find people who are absolutely dedicated to the wildlife and conservationists and people working for wildlife conservation, protecting extinct species, protecting extinct animals. So it is so, the problem in itself is so vast that there cannot be one single solution to it. Is issue is that the animal law in itself, in the kind of importance or emphasis that it should have got, it has not. Unfortunately, the penal provisions that we find for cruelty to animals even today is 50 rupees. The law was drafted in 1960. The act was passed in 1960, which was originally copied from 1890, a law of 1890. And 1960 law retained the punishment of 1890, which was 50 rupees of fine for the first offense of cruelty. And 100 rupees. In 1960 also it was fairly, but it has not been amended since then. Even if I were to inflict any animal with cruelty and someone is aware of that law and then goes and files a police complaint, if the police actually takes it seriously and writes a complaint, then my fine would probably be 50 rupees. So there are a lot of blockages on the way which really need to be cleared. A lot of things in India, we know that we have a different ministry for a lot of for Ministry of Environment, Ministry of Natural Resources, of Labor, etc., etc. Similarly, the entire ambit of animal law, it has been shifting with the government also between different ministries. At one point of time, it was put under Ministry of Agriculture. Then it was put under Ministry of Environment. And then Ministry of Environment was expanded to Ministry of Environment and Climate Change. So animal law within it became a big thing to deal with. It was to Ministry of Agriculture. So with that, what happens is on some level, we are also giving this indication that it is not important enough to vertical ladder or a segment for animal protection. Because within animal protection itself, like you mentioned, and like I'm saying, that there is a need for terrestrial animals, there is a need for wildlife, there is a need for domesticated animals, poultry animals, farmed animals, agrarian animals, stray animals. There are so many different categories, and that in itself is such a huge task to deal with, that we have to have a dedicated vertical channel which can take when from the swinging and being just pushed around from one pocket to another. It some way indicates or implies how we are giving lesser importance to this as an issue. So I think the problem, like I said, is vast. Each category, each section of animals require, in whatever habitat they belong to, wherever they belong to, it requires a lot of work, manpower, resources, a lot of things to be put into for their utmost protection and benefit. Yeah.
Thank you. This is the last question for you, Dr. Mahapatra, for today's night. When we are going to celebrate 100 years of India's freedom struggle in 2047, what is your perception and how far your insights or foresights for the 100 years of India about particular the animal law is concerned? You rightly picked out it's very vast and very meaningless, because nobody taking so seriously, even not the government and not the ministry as well, put somewhere to somewhere and somewhere to some other. What is your ideas about the animal habitability, solidarity, and the most important aspect of sustainability? What is your ideas?
So to begin with, I would first would like to see the law amended, at least the penal provisions being very, very stringent, a lot of awareness about the fact that there does exist such a law, and that people should start taking it seriously. In 75 years, we've just come this far, and I hope in the next, when we reach 100 years, I hope by then people, at least on a very personal level, what the state can do and what the government can do, what the courts can do, that's plenty that they can do, and how they can execute it, and all of it is there. But what the change that I think I personally I really like to see is change in humankind at a very personal level, to take this very seriously, that it is not okay to kick a dog on the road for nothing. It is not okay to keep your pet or keep your domesticated animal chained throughout the day, all day long. It is not okay to see an injured animal on the road and turn your face away and just walk away. There are so many things infrastructure wise also that we really need to strengthen. That is something again that I really hope to see. The animal ambulances, that if I see an injured animal on the road, I can dial a 108, a 107, a 106, some number, and an animal ambulance can just rush to the point and take the animal to a good veterinary hospital where it can be taken care of. So there are, I think, a lot of things that I wish to see when India completes 100 in terms of this. But these are a few top things.
Thank you, ma'am. Now, Professor Lakshmikant Misra is here with us. He's a senior professor from Ravenshaw University. Want to ask something to you. Over to you, sir. Professor Misra, please ask your question.
Hello.
Yes, sir. Good afternoon. Good evening.
So, good evening. Actually, I don't have any specific questions, and so the thing is that virtually when this Hirakud dam project was completed, neither the government nor any organizations thought about the animals, and they were in many of the small islands, they were left for their own sake, and virtually because this appealed to my mind, because I saw a report few days back that there are certain patches within the reservoir itself where the domestic animals, particularly the cattle, have gone wild. Nobody did bother about them. And secondly, and you know that the whole globe, the world is has become war prone, and currently the USSR Ukraine war is going on. I don't think if anyone is thinking about the animals of any kind, particularly what is happening to them, and people are running away from these cities, whether to Poland or elsewhere, and where would the animals go? This situation is not typical to USSR Ukraine. This happened to the animal kingdom during the First World War, as well as during Second World War. And also this has happened to the animal life in the Khorasan territory, which has always remained war-ridden. And even if in Burmese sector, Myanmar sector, where we find cross of arms quite often, and nobody is thinking, in spite of the claims by the Western countries that they are very sensitive to the rights of animals. But I have not seen any report as such about the conditions of the animals, particularly in these war-prone situations, warlike situations. Another thing which I want to draw your kind attention, and just this is not a question at all. Sometimes, some animals who live with the humans, and they happen to create troubles troubles to the people, and depriving the people of their livelihood, and there are no laws, no such laws how to handle them, particularly about the monkeys devastating the life of the peasants in the villages, and their number growing day by day. And so there should also be laws how to handle these situations. And and also, that in the name of virtually, I don't know what is the situation in Bitarkanika, but the reports say that every month or two, three people are being eaten away by the crocodiles, and how to handle those things. Okay, that's it.
Thank you so much, sir. So I think all of it that you pointed out mostly hints towards human-animal conflict, and a lot of it, what experts say, is also created by us because we have encroached upon a lot of forest land, a lot of their natural habitats. We find them into our homes, and I think these the example, one example that you gave of where a certain kind of animal causes a lot of nuisance in one particular area, or is a threat to humans in one particular place or area. Under the Wildlife Act, actually, there is a provision where the state government can declare an animal, one particular animal, as a vermin if it is felt that it is actually causing that much of danger to human life there, and then accordingly appropriate action can be taken. But otherwise, like I said earlier also, that the problems are plenty. For some there are solutions in our hand, for some there aren't, and a lot of work still needs to be done. I think the only point that I'm trying to make is that whatever is in our hands, at least that much, if we can do, I think it will be a better place for us and for them as well.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Mishra, and thank you, ma'am, for to answer Professor Mishra. Now, I would like to conclude the session with a formal vote of thanks. Ma'am, you are talking about very serious issues, definitely, and the animal issues are very powerful issues. As we do not consider these issues as important issues, like as the sustainable development aims to balance different needs, ours achieving dignity, peace, and prosperity for the people against an awareness of the environmental, social, and economic limitations we face as a society. This implies as a holistic approach, fully considering the wider and future impacts of different and often competing needs. So, this is the need of the hour, and who will discuss the complexity of the issues, declare that sustainability can be seen as the capacity to create, test, and maintain adaptivity capability, and that the phrase sustainable development refers to the goal of foresting, adaptive capabilities and creating opportunities. So the United Nations have to be also look on this matter, as Professor Mishra said. What are the implications, or what should be the laws for the animals in the war zones? These are the very important issues to think about in this 21st century. And nevertheless, there are obvious areas where animals play an important role in the context of sustainable development. These include, for instance, food security, transport, employment, and livelihoods. There are less positive effects of man interaction with animal also, as well as the number of drawbacks associated with continuous growth and intensification of animal sector. These include challenges to the environment, water and soil pollution, and also damage the ecosystem as well. So thank you, ma'am, for discussing several important issues and addressing the problems and what should be the law of our next generation in this World Human Sciences and Management Conference. Thank you for joining us and giving your precious time. And I would like to particularly thank the institutional support for Ravenshaw University, Central University of Odisha, and Indian Institute of Management, Sambalpur, and our patrons, Professor Dr. Sanjay Nayak, Professor Sarath Palita, and Professor Mahadev Joyswal, for their institutional support. I'd like to thank our conveners, Professor Chandi Prasad Nanda and Charudar Panigrai, for their relentless motivations to continuing this World Human Science and Management Conference. And I'd like to thank the entire man behind this conference is Dr. Bikram Kesari Jena, the Director, Center for Adivasi Research and Development, who a man with a difference trying to enrich every sectors of educations and debate, discussion, and dialogue over the issues on particularly burning issues of this global south. Ma'am, you are going to be happy to listen that we are approximately conducted 150 sessions of World Human Science and Management Conference, and largely this is the biggest webinar series of the world, I thought. And thank you, and to be part of this conference. And I would like to thank the entire teammates and members of Center for Adivasi Research and Development, all advisors, all our participants watching us Facebook Live and YouTube, and all the professors, our partners, all are those are with us and providing their good wishes to Center for Adivasi Research and Development. Thank you, all of them, and thank you so much, ma'am, for joining us again. Thank you. The meeting is concluded.
Thank you so much for inviting me. Very nice.
Welcome, ma'am. Namaste.